Yeah, before we start, probably good to do a very brief introduction of our panelists. I've noted most of you here in the room have been following pretty much all of the talks, so you probably have seen quite a few of the people here on the panel. But brief introduction, Nick Sherman of Game Insights did a talk earlier, which I think most of you have seen. Heini from Matchmade. Before that, she was with Super Evil Megacorp, which most of you will probably know from the mobile esports game Vainglory. So she can provide quite some sort of like insights on that. Then we've got Kim from Emoji Games. We can sort of like talk a little bit more about sort of like trends in esports and also how that is sort of like evolving into something called decentralized esports. Solen needs no further introduction, has just been speaking and representing Jinx TV, and Arne, who you've probably seen before during his earlier talk, of esports.com, and before that he was with ESL. So we have sort of like a pretty sort of like experienced and broad panel who can talk in depth about esports. Now, the talks that you've seen earlier are partially about sort of like esports in general, to a large extent, sort of like esports on desktop or console. What we're here to explore is like talk about the future of esports, but particularly talk about the future of esports like on mobile. Most of the people here attending at PGC are mobile developers, mobile publishers, somehow involved in mobile. And I think it would be interesting to see sort of like what trends are people seeing in the market where mobile is getting sort of like to become like a larger part of the esports pie. And also, I think, which will be interesting for mobile developers, is to think a little bit about like what can you do to sort of like be part of that as a mobile developer, and what can you do to sort of like enhance the development of mobile esports. So I think it's probably good to sort of like start off with some sort of questions for the panelists, and it would be great if you have questions to sort of like there will be time for questions. I don't know whether you want to do that at the end or
however you want to play it.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case, I think it would be more interesting if you have questions. Just raise your hand and someone will get you a mic, because I think the more interactive the discussion is, the more interesting it will be. So kicking off with the panel, I mean, we've all seen the presentations and it's all pretty clear that esports is big business. Mobile games is big business and mobile esports is a growing business. But the question is, could it be a larger opportunity? And just sort of like interested to hear your thoughts on, if so, what is there to be done to sort of like make mobile esports sort of like bigger than it currently is? And maybe we could kick off with you, Arne.
We have 40 minutes, right?
Yeah.
I think I've mentioned some of those points in my presentation already. I think there are reasons why mobile esports hasn't really kicked off yet, and some of them are technical. Latency and connectivity stability is like two major issues in mobile esports, but also the difference in devices, input, and how you actually perform a game with a mobile device. And then I also think there just haven't been the right games yet in esports. Some of them were like adaptations or like ways to try out how to actually do that, how to move it from PC to mobile. But I think the real success factor is really going to be that one guy or that one team that starts focusing on a similar but very different experience that you can have on a mobile device when it comes to playing competitively. And we all know it's super complicated. It would be much easier. Someone asked the question about 1 versus 1. It would be much easier if it was just 1 versus 1, but instead it's rather going to be a team. So 4 versus 4 or 5 versus 5 game, and that adds so much more complexity. And realizing that on a mobile device is much more difficult than on the PC. Now I don't want to take too much time for this one question, but I think there is a lot of opportunity for mobile esports, and we just have to find the right approach. And I think since mobile is much more casual than a PC or PC gaming, I think there's also a possible or maybe the right way to look at it. How can I develop a more casual mobile esports type of experience, but still keep up to the key requirements that I talked about earlier, like it has to be skill-based, it has to have a steep learning curve, and all these things to actually make this esports experience happen.
Yeah, and I think...
I think there's one point that I also want to make. I think speaking about the future of mobile esports, you kind of have to look at it a little bit east and west. In the east, I think it's already happening. I was just digging some data. I mean, King of Glory, which is the eastern version of Arena of Valor, they're peaking at 20 million viewers for their esports. So it's already happening there, and there's a lot of viewership, perhaps because the region is more kind of mobile dominant to begin with. But in the West, I agree with all the points that you make. I think we're still waiting for that right title, and we're still waiting for that right format. I think even with Vainglory, I think one of the big mistakes we made with our esports, we were so stuck with what esports is that we kind of didn't look at innovating enough, because in the end people don't want to watch esports, especially a mobile game, for 8 hours straight. So rethinking the format into more of a I don't know what the solution is, if it's a video on demand type of thing or like more snippets and you know, keep it a little bit more shorter. I think Clash Royale is doing a lot on this side, but anyway, yeah.
And I think that's where mobile developers should maybe sort of like start to think a little bit like about innovation. So the different format that is a little bit more like viewer friendly and maybe sort of like technically more suitable for mobile. So in a way, when I heard questions about, well, why can't it be like a 1 versus 1 type of esports game, or why can't it be turn-based? I mean, I guess if you get the game right, there's no reason why it couldn't be. I mean, take a game like chess. I mean, it's hugely popular. I mean, someone at some point might nail it in the right way, and it might even be interesting to sort of like watch. I don't know what your thoughts are on.
Yeah, thank you. So what I think is that the problem is not on the game side, because what I think is that any game could be esports. Any competitive game could be esports. But the problem is with the mobile esports in particular is that we need to wait until people will take it seriously. Because I can't imagine the kid who says to his mom, I am not going to college, I will play mobile phone. Right? Because esports is a kind of profession. You should, you know, focus just on this thing and, you know, drop all the other activities you had before. You had to spend not hours but days and weeks, for example, attending your bootcamp with teammates, and that's something you should take really serious. And again, now I cannot imagine that situation.
That's where I'm happy to disagree. Finally, I like panels where there's some disagreement. You're right when you talk about like the pro level in esports, but I think where esports is developing right now is to the casual and mainstream level. And just like in traditional sports, not everyone has to be in a training camp all week to play the finals of the Champions League or to be successful in the Premier League or Bundesliga. I think that where esports is going right now is the more mainstream side, where you don't have to do exactly what you just described. Only if you become an aspiring pro gamer, and if you're really going to end up as a pro gamer in one of the top teams. But there are so many people out there that don't necessarily want to be that, but they will still want to enjoy esports, playing competitively, and all the social aspects that we heard about. That gaming and esports is about. So I think, yes, true for high-end pro side of things, but I think we're going to see much, much more than that in the future.
Yes, exactly. But that's not about professional esports. I mean, it's exactly something mainstream. For example, I'm a runner. I run marathons, but I am not a professional one. Okay, so I cannot compete for winning marathon, but I just enjoy participating. So that's this kind of stuff, I think.
Yeah, and even if you don't want to be the best in marathon, you would still compare your times to your friends that do the same. So they would do the same kind of sports on a much lower level. So the competition and the comparison would always be there, but you would never want to be like the fastest man in the world, right?
Yeah, so it's still about the definition.
It's indeed about the definition of what is esports, and I think the point that Arne made, it's not necessarily about being the pro sort of like top tier player, and also I think the point that Solène made during her talk, esports is getting a lot more about sort of like the social interaction, and I think mobile developers might be, in my view, at a sort of like at a slight advantage there, because they're so used to sort of like catering for an audience which is all about social and social interaction. So I'd be curious to hear sort of like what you guys are seeing in the slightly more casual social end of competitive gaming and esports.
Okay, and I see my name, you can see that Kim. Most of Koreans, 30% surname is Kim. So when I walk on the street, maybe you're Korean. Yes, I'm Korean. So, when you see the Korea, this is some kind of, back to this is 2018. So back to the 20 years ago. It's 1997, 1998. At the time, what happened in Korea, when you see the Wikipedia, there's an Asian finance crisis happened. This is something like all the bankrupt in Asia. It's a very long story, more than 20 years ago. So at that time, a lot of, at that time, I was in Korea, so something kind of happened. So people, they don't want kind of stop any financial expense, they stop it. Like traveling, they stop it, everything. This is what is important, kind of saving the cost. But how to do it? People, they want to enjoy the time. This is a way. Suddenly business started. This name is PC Bang. Bang stands for the room. So they made some kind of this space. They set up the computer system, and they just plug in the LAN cable. And then at that time, coincidence happened. This is very important. StarCraft. Yeah, StarCraft over there, and the economy. This is two factors. Something happened because StarCraft over there and the PC Bang over there is combined. It's chemical happened. And all of teenagers, I wasn't a teenager, but all of people, they're crazy. They love to play the games together. So they don't want to go outside, because then you go outside during the hour, they spend a lot of money. But just play the game, the charge by hour, this very cost saving, and they very enjoy. This is kind of turning point. You see the esports story is something like big turning point in 1997, 1998 from the Korea. And then this big influence to the teenagers is, oh my God, this is one of the esports. But very funny thing, when I was at the time 20 years ago, this is esports. My friend, they're laughing. They are laughing. Do you think about this esports? They ha ha ha, this laughing. And then, but nowadays, when you mention about esports, it's very fancy, very fancy. It's very something like nice in the something. So this is something takes time more than 20 years. Yeah, this timing is more than 20 years. And actually, I wasn't living in UK around 8 years when I passed to the Heathrow airport. At that time, I'm holding the Korean passport. And then when I passed immigration, they giving the question always, officer, what do you do? Just 8 to 10 years ago, what do you do? My job is selling the mobile game. And she said, the officer, what is mobile game? Yeah, I said, my job is selling the mobile game. And she said, yeah, I heard. I saw my son play the game on the mobile phone. Just time 8 to 10 years. Just time to 8 to 10 years. And nowadays, when you mention the mobile game, all the people know it. What is mobile game? There's a reason. When you see the esports, PC and StarCraft started 20 years ago. nowadays time passed to 20 years. And the mobile game business just started last 7 to 8 years. I think this next need the time. I know the many issues. As maybe I have to maybe open some information because I know the main factor for the mobile industry. Like you see you are using most of the Android handset from the Google, and the iOS from the Apple. But another something behind this thing, they want to control it behind. Like I just said the two monopoly, duopoly. The two duopoly is kind of any social gaming platform, any startup company want to show it, they carry it.
Yeah. So getting a little bit back more about social and esports is about sort of like viewing and sharing. I'd be curious to hear a little bit more from Solène and Heine about like how to get sort of like media involved and I mean particularly how Heine did that at Vainglory. Sort of like the challenges there, because I think that could be quite enlightening for game developers and also from Solène on like are mobile developers sort of like overlooking like traditional TV? Are they missing a trick here?
I can go first. I mean, to talk about the Vainglory side, maybe kind of the social side, I think something that we really leaned heavily on, and I think that was one of the things that we did right, was the community level and the casual tournaments that were happening outside of anything official. And then once we started working on our own official program, we actually utilized a lot of that know-how, and I hired 2 guys to actually join the company. And I think kind of the mobile social aspect, where it's easy for people to play a game together in a room because we all have our phones out anyway, I do think that plays into it. And then with regard to your media question, I do think there's a lot of interest from the press on mobile esports. It's just kind of like what the F, like for a lot of people. So, and if you can tell a good story about like no, like this is legit, this is real, and then especially once we started getting like teams involved, like Cloud9s and stuff, we had good turnout, and we worked with Jinx TV for our London event as well, and it was great. So yeah.
Actually, it's fun, but Vainglory is the only mobile game developer who contacted Jinx to broadcast a tournament with a real event and something that we could create content around, and we send the team. What I find it interesting is that we just discussed how esports is, how big it is, and when actually how many of us do have a gaming computer at home and something that allows you to play, while how many of us have a mobile in our pocket and we can play all day long and whenever we want. I also think that people are overthinking the esports games on mobile, and there might not be a title as big as Dota 2 or League of Legends, but to me, there will be more mobile games and different communities, maybe smaller than the ones we see on PC. But I really think that, and I know for sure that there's an appetite for mobile games on traditional and on media. Until very recently, we had very little content available for us to broadcast. As a TV channel, we need high quality content. We can't broadcast a mobile screen, basically. It is changing, and we are, as media, also ready to push it and promote it as much as we can. It makes sense for everyone. Traditional media is consumed on mobile. It's only natural for us to broadcast and promote this kind of content.
Yeah, and Arne, maybe you can sort of like tie into that. So if you're a mobile developer and you've got a competitive game and you start to see sort of like pick up from the community that they're organizing their own little sort of like matches and tournaments, I mean, what should sort of like game developers look to do sort of like next if they want to sort of like amp up the volume of their game?
First of all, I think what Solène said is absolutely right. So you don't necessarily have to target and aim to become the next Dota 2 or League of Legends. That's really not necessary. And from a game developer perspective, I think I always like to call it, you have to be esports ready. So you should not try to develop an esports title, but if you have esports in mind because your gameplay is designed in the right way, you should prepare for the necessary steps that need to be taken. So there's technical aspects you have to take into consideration, which I think by now most people are aware of. There's a few more things you need to take into consideration because it's mobile, so you have to find multiplayer back-end solutions that help you cope with the problems of a mobile device when it's not turn-based. But I think the biggest hurdles is how to deal with the community and how to involve the community into where your game is actually going. And to me, it's like live operations of a standard free-to-play game, but more complex. Mm-hmm. Because it requires even more resources and it requires even more listening and caring than you normally do when you have a working monetization model and you say, well, these few people here, I don't care too much about their complaints because everybody else loves it. But the community, and especially in the early stages of your game, they will decide whether the game will take the route of esports or whether it won't. So working with them and using them, and this has been said a couple of times, use your community and make them part of your team. So integrate them as an external extension of your team to do community, to become shoutcasters, streamers, moderators. Some of them may even become your new community managers, and some of them will eventually become producers if you grow even bigger, like we've seen with Nick's example, where suddenly you're running not only Go 4 Cups online, but you turn them into live events. And yes, you can use tournament organizers and production companies, but you also have to have knowledge and experience in-house to deal with all these things, and you have to use them as a feedback channel to how you want to further develop your game and structure your game as it grows and becomes more of an esport.
I have some slightly different opinion. It's not totally different, slightly. Actually, 8 years ago, I made a similar platform. The name is Pocket Arena. And I added all the platform. I spent a lot of money to make a whole system, like iOS, Android, everything. I made it. The problem was when I work with together like a game, and I need a game developer. I didn't develop the game. I just provide the platform, like exactly social function, everything. I just added. The problem was when I work with together, I delivered all the file for free to our business partner, a game developer. They said, no, I cannot use it. So I said, is there any problem? Any function is not enough, something? No, this is not important. The important is relationship with Google and Apple. This is the main key. Why? Because when you work with Apple, they say, oh, why you don't use Apple, Google's Apple Game Center? And then another game developer, they said, we cannot use this one. Why? Because if you don't adopt your platform, the problem is relation with Google team. Why? Because this top game developer, they always feature their game on their app store. This is another way how to save the cost, marketing saving. That's a reality. So that's the reason I talked with this company more than 3 to 4 years, and then talking. And then I decided maybe stop this service. I lost a lot of money, more than $5 million US. 5 million. You can guess about how many people I hire, a lot of people. I do the marketing. I just talking and then talking, and sorry, not 5 million, 4 million US. This is something like very suffering. This is something like I have a little anger, like something like Google and Apple, why they are always cut and kill and something behind, something like Yeah. So this is something behind some reason. When you compare the PC, a lot of freedom. Yeah, there's a lot of freedom. I can do them. When you see the terms and condition in the Apple and Google store, if you do something like event marketing, they need their agreement.
Okay, I'm sort of like that was some time ago. I think sort of for games on mobile that are sort of like being played competitively and are massively popular. I don't know, Heini, whether you're sort of like seeing similar problems, but I guess for most games we're sort of past that point, I would hope.
Yeah, I mean, I think Apple and Google are incredibly important relationships, especially for getting downloads and getting features. I mean, Vainglory has a deep love affair with Apple, which has been very good for us. But on the community building side, I do think there's amazing tools nowadays. There's the Discords, there's the Twitters, there's the forums. Even if you're a mobile game, you can do so much outside of Google and Apple. And I think especially for the esports side, there's Tournament, for example, that's really good. There's a ton of different and often free tools to use for that side.
Yeah.
But just for example, that I want to try something event, and I must pass to Google, Apple, their agreement. They approve it. There's just delay. They don't give any answer. I just contact to what happened. Just fix the time like this exact event after 2 months, and then they don't give any clear answer during the sometimes 3 months delay, and then we're very upset. And then when I want to contact to them, you cannot contact, only send the email. I want to know contact to their phone number, no phone number, just close it, hiding. And then this is something real situation. Anything event is impossible. Okay, we have to throw away iOS. This is something different point. And you see the PC. This is a lot of people we can control it. But this is this is the main point. I know the Twitch something something is okay. Casual game is fine. Casual event, something like something very casual game, and then not connected their business. It's not related to their business. It's fine. But any related to their business, they always block it. Something any big something. That's the reason is nowadays one of when you I saw the article Pocket Gamer, the portraits is downloading a lot. It's the APK delivery APK file. This is something the right decision. Why? Because the main key is we have to the kind of say goodbye to Google and Apple Store, and then next step is a lot of freedom. You can control it. It's a kind of who can control the power. So if
I mean, I like to sort of keep it sort of to the future of esports rather than the future of the app stores.
Yeah, that's my point. Is future esports, especially most of people using the mobile phone. This is future esports. The key is it's kind of independent from the Apple and Google. We can control the power. After that, we can do whatever. Just kind of community, and then this is my opinion. So maybe some people may have different opinion, but this is a
rage against Google and Apple. I don't know. I think we have panels about the App Store discussions at pretty much every mobile conference, and I think it's yes, we know there are problems, there are hurdles, big hurdles to overcome, but it's on a different level. I think what we are trying to do here is to figure out how a game, and we have to do all the relationships, like Heini said, with the big guys, but how to turn a competitive multiplayer game into an esports. And I don't think that Google and Apple are like the hurdles, because you already have to jump over those hurdles before you can talk about esports. So if you aren't, I said this earlier in my presentation, your game has to have a viable monetization model. It needs to be well balanced so you can make money with it before you can even think about investing into esports. But I'm pretty sure Nick can confirm that in the beginning you only paid into esports, so it was just paying and not making money.
Yes, that's total true. So, and it's of course, I mean, again, I have many complaints about platforms because, as I said, Guns of Boom unfortunately has this the word guns in its name, and it's a huge pain for us. And even if not taking the name, but even the icon of the application is also always a problem because we tend to, every once in a while, put a new icon into the store, and it's always a problem because, for example, in Google, first of all, they told us that we cannot use real weapons, so on the icon. So we put on the icon a guy who just aimed with his fingers, okay, so like that, okay. So after that, they said that we cannot use this guy because he's aiming in a real person. So, okay, we make him aiming into the target. So then they said us that we cannot use this icon because the target kind of similar to a real person. I mean, the form of the shape of the target. So it's always some kind of pain. But it has nothing to do with esports, to be honest.
No. So maybe I see some questions popping up in the room, and as we only have some less than 10 minutes, good to sort of address a few of the questions in the room.
Yeah, that's great. We'll bring you a mic.
Okay, sort of heard myself for asking this, but I'm going to ask about Fortnite, because Ram Ismail was talking yesterday about how it's not a game that was specifically made for mobile phones, and it suffers from many of the limitations you were mentioning, like you obviously get connectivity issues if you're on the go, etc. But it's the #1 game right now, and what do you think we can learn from it? So instead of trying to think about how would the perfect game for mobile phones be, if maybe we have to think as well, can we get things from games from other platforms and turn this into sort of esports maybe in mobile phones as well?
Do you mind if I take this one quickly? To me, and I'm at the marketing segment in Jinx, and to me Fortnite is a brilliant example of how a marketing strategy works perfectly. Fortnite became popular suddenly when someone, it's Ninja with Drake, started playing, and everyone started talking about it, and suddenly it's okay to be a gamer, and you're not a nerd if you spend 2 hours playing on your mobile. And I think it is brilliant that they didn't try to reach only the esports scene, but they presented themselves to the casual gamers as very good esports games, and they made it okay for everyone to play. And suddenly everyone thinks that they are esports gamers, and they are just actually playing Fortnite.
To add to that a little bit, with regard to what can we learn from other platforms on mobile, I think honestly we can learn that multi-platform can work, but a direct port from PC to mobile never works. I mean, Vainglory, I think it's a MOBA that was made for touch, but it's still very much a PC format of a game, which comes with complexities. On the performance side, it was fine because the engine was so good, proprietary tech. So I do think one thing that is very, very important for mobile esport, and if you want to become a viable mobile esport, is figure out how to get the tech bit to work. And if you want to talk about Wi-Fi and getting latency-free Wi-Fi at events, I have the guys who could do that. But there's a lot of that kind of stuff I think we can learn. But in the end, taking a game from another platform and porting it, does it work? Maybe you guys disagree with me, but yeah, you kind of have to be mobile first, in my point of view.
Hey, thank you first of all for a really good panel. I've been enjoying your all. Actually, I'm doing a mobile esports offline tournament here in Finland, which started last week, lasting for 8 weeks and ending at the Game Expo finals. My idea behind that is actually building up the mobile esports culture. I would love to hear what is your how do you see what's the biggest ingredient of building the culture? Because now actually we have interested publishers, companies, we got community doing things, but what do you see is the most important thing actually build up the culture?
Can I take that? 3 things, in my opinion. Get money involved. If you have a big prize tournament, people are for sure going to be interested. If there's 100,000 euros on the line, even my mom might be interested in that case, right? 2, get the press involved, getting the mainstream media, getting some sort of angle for MTV3, Aamu TV to give a damn, I think is critical. And then 3, have fun, make it super fun and make it inclusive. I think one thing that with esports that bothers me is how polished it is and how kind of it looks like you have to be so good to get there that I'm kind of pushed aback. But if you can make it more inclusive and more fun, I think that's the 3 things. I don't know, Arne, you might have extra.
Yeah, I think that word production quality is being used a lot, especially for the big events, and you'll see thousands of complaints if something goes wrong, no matter what tournament organizer we talk about. But I've been at events in the US that were very community-driven, that were even based on playing on super old consoles and TV monitors I hadn't seen in years, and probably my father hadn't seen, but super old basic equipment But you could see that the community there was having such a fun and such a blast. And it didn't really have like this super organized tournament structure. So people were playing in small teams. They could qualify for a larger round. In the end, they would play on stage. They had a lot of fun. It even was live on Twitch TV, and a couple of hundred for the final, even 1,000 people watched. And I think that shows that if you do the right thing for the right title, then just get the community involved. Use social media as much as you can and try to do that we heard about earlier. It's about the people. The people are coming there to have fun. The people are there to, to socialize, to speak to other people. So try to make them interact. Try to get them deeply involved. At some of those events, you would see people that come out of their caves that normally just don't go out. But they do this because it's their thing, it's their game, and they too want to be social. Maybe they are not the most social people in the world, but if you just happen to find the right approach and be inclusive, I like that a lot, then it can work.
Yeah. Let's...
Sorry.
Hello. I think earlier on there was a point raised between Arne and Nikita. And I think that was probably one of the best points about the future of mobile esports. I think a lot of people right now view it as something that's very professional, like a lot of cameras, highly polished, big rigs. But going back to the casual side of it, and if you think the future does look casual, how does that look? Are there like esports arenas, and are they popping up in your town or on your high street? Or is it just people playing from home? And if it's just people playing from home, like, how do you define mobile esports? Is it people gathering in the same place, or is it just people playing from home? And it has to get more casual if it's going to be on the mobile side.
All of what you just said. People will start playing at home. And this is how you actually build a community and get their interest. And you have to be able to provide an online platform for people to do that. And not only just play, but again, interact and become social about it. But what we see everywhere in the world is these little arenas or clubs where people come together and play, or esports bars, and play together and start doing just their local, very easy tournaments on a weekend. So they know Saturday afternoon they can go to that esports bar and play their favorite game with other people. And they have to sign up first. So it's very handmade, organized tournaments, but it gets people involved. And over time, things will just grow into more organized structures, into bigger events, and eventually become something bigger. And as we heard, it doesn't necessarily have to be the 15,000 people arena event. But if one day you suddenly have 200,000 people in a room, 200 people in a room that watch your tournament, then you'd be super happy, because it's an achievement, and it's an evolution in what you're doing. And I can tell you, back in the early days of esports, in the early ESL events, when we had 200 people either watching online or being in one room together, or at a Gamescom or something like that, we were so proud. We couldn't have been any prouder. This was like the biggest achievement of our lifetimes. And suddenly, it wasn't 200 anymore, it was 500. And we couldn't believe it was 500. And it went on and on like this. And now we have these numbers of millions of people watching at a weekend. This is like something we never dreamt. Maybe we dreamt of, but we never thought would realize.
Okay.
Does that help?
I think I'm being cued here that we are about to wrap up. Do we have one last question? Or?
We can squeeze one more in. One more.
One more? Okay.
Hi. Yeah, so we have a game called Battlelands Royale, which we think is kind of esports friendly. If you haven't downloaded it yet and played it yet, then you definitely should. It's available on the very popular Google and App stores. But yeah, my main question, which has kind of been touched upon just now, was like, what do you think are the key steps to take to get started? And like, what are the main lessons that you've learned, or like any takeaways from like any failings that you don't regret doing, but you've learned a lot from?
Yeah.
I think, like, going back, the first esport event we did, and that's probably the one that I remember with like most love and warmth, is the first one because we actually didn't have any professional partner. Later on, we worked with ESL and stuff, but we just reached out to our community and was like, hey, community volunteers, who wants to build an esport event together with us? And that's what we did. It was an esport arena in Santa Ana back then, which hadn't even launched, and it was like one of our developers on the camera, and you know, a couple of friends of ours doing the shoutcasting, and like one of our CFO was the camera operator of our in-game camera, and like it was just volunteer based. Like even the makeup people were from our community, and I think that like it did two things. It showed that one, our community wants this, and two, that there is potential here, because we had a full house, we had a ton of people show up, and for like people to volunteer their time and hours, not only to watch it but to produce the esport with us, it was just amazing. And we still have, I'm still close friends with a lot of the Vainglory community side. So I think that was one thing we did well. And then two, I think we went too quickly from that to working with ESL and stuff, which is fantastic. Like those events were the best that we had production-wise. But then as we got kind of very professional very quickly, we lost some of that community touch and feel, in my opinion. And we should have kind of scaled it with a little bit more patience. But you know, when you're ambitious and young and doing crazy stuff, you just want to go hard. But like, that's maybe one of the things, is like take baby steps. Maybe it's going from 200 to 500 and then to 1,000, and not from 200 to 5,000. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be patient is something that is super important, because you know, things usually don't happen overnight, and there's so many things you have to take into consideration, and the growth of your player base and spectator base will actually mean that it becomes more complex to fulfill the expectations of this growing audience. And it's much easier to work with 200 people and make them happy than working with 5,000, 50,000, 5 million, and so on. Now, on the other hand, don't be afraid of making mistakes, as long as you're ready to learn from it, and be very communicative about it with the community. So tell them, oh, we figured out, we made this mistake, we're doing this slightly different now. Please stay tuned, or help us trying to find a solution for this problem. And as long as you include the community into those decisions, and maybe also into those mistakes, they will realize, oh, it's not that easy. It wasn't just your mistake, it was also the community's mistake. So include the community, don't be afraid of making mistakes, but you know, go step by step, and don't try to run.
Okay, right.
Wrap it up there.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, guys. And yeah,
thank you. Yeah, a round of applause for Peter, Jon, Arne, Nikita, Salon, and Heini, please. Thank you. Thanks, guys. That was great.